Let's see. My last video was mid-June. You know what that means. Time for our year-end wrap-up. Not to fall into hyperbole, but 2024 may have been one of the most impactful years of my life, in ways both good and bad, and I really want to dive into it so that I might make 2025 even bigger and better. Today, I want to just give the overview of everything that I read, watched, listened to, played, and did throughout the year. In the following week, there will be other videos on the BidMock YouTube channel going into specifics, as well as choosing my favorites for the year. But for today, I just want to look at everything as a whole. If you happen to be listening to this in podcast form, you won't be missing much. The video counterpart will have the same audio, but I am going to place it over random gameplay, and I might include some visual aids depending on how ambitious I want to be in the editing. I'm admittedly getting to this script late, and I happen to be a bit under the weather, as you can probably tell through my voice, so I'm guessing the additions will not be much. For any public accounts or specific links that I mentioned throughout this script, they will be linked in the description. Now let's get into it. Going into the year, I wanted to really focus on consistency on the newly formed BidMock YouTube channel. And in my defense, it started fairly well. I managed to release my 2023 wrap-up videos within that first week, and I was able to get some video ideas finished in a timely fashion. Some of my favorite videos I've ever made were released this year, including the extremely personal Mother's Day video. And there are definitely some series ideas that I want to return to, such as My Little PowerPoint and Rogue Ramblings. Overall though, there are 3 videos that impacted my year more than any others. First up was the Killer Sofa Review, which released in early February. Now I have done this movie review idea on the BidMock podcast, but this was the first attempt in video form. I was very satisfied with the way it came together, especially with the addition of video clips to add to the pacing and humor of the overall script. It didn't get too many eyes on it, but the reason this one has stuck with me is that the director of the movie had watched the video and even left a comment. That one comment left me beaming for the rest of the week. At the end of that same month, I released my biggest project to date, titled The Blueberry Prologue, in which I showcased an in-game Pokemon team that I put together and entered into an online tournament. And while this video got less views, it did have more comments than any other video I had made up to that point. I was also extremely happy with the way everything came together in the end. The script included multiple song parodies and narrative themes that I worked really hard on, and to see it come together in a final product in time for release on Pokemon Day really pushed me to consider other big projects down the road. The final video that I want to highlight came out in early May, and it was surprisingly the video with the most views and engagement on the channel. I am of course talking about my Big Fat Eurovision Obsession. Having a video pop off so quickly about a topic I never expected to gain much traction at all was exhilarating. It proved to me that having a channel as diverse as what I'm aiming for can still manage to reach an audience in the YouTube algorithm. Unfortunately, shortly after this video, I lost steam in the video creation side of my life, mainly due to real-life events and the mental space it put me in. But going into 2025, I would like to tackle a few more projects I've been working up in my mind, and I would also like to return for some smaller videos even if uploading is inconsistent. As a kid, I was a big reader. Over the course of one summer in particular, my summer reading journal ended up hitting triple digits. Many of the kids at school refused to believe me, but what they failed to realize is that I never really had any friends to hang out with, and my house was only 2 doors down from the public library. So when my sister and I were told to go outside to play, we would make the short trek to the library to read in the cool AC. After graduating, reading became less and less of a priority until eventually years had gone by without any book being finished. This year, I vowed to change that. I started by downloading the Fable app and creating an account so that I could track my reading and essentially gamify the task to an extent. I set a small goal of 5 books by the end of the year, and once I started reading, I realized that that was much too low. I hit 5 books by the end of June, and now that the year is over, I am sitting at 28 books read throughout the year, and I have a full pile of books prepared going into 2025. If you have any interest in following or joining me in my journey, or potentially reading my book reviews, feel free to download the app and follow me on Fable. Last year, I struggled to hit as many movies as I wanted to by the end of the year, and going into 2024, I wanted to take in more of the new releases for the year, which proved to be rather difficult because 2024 was not a great year for movies in general. Don't get me wrong, there were still gems to be found, especially with the horror genre rising into a type of higher plane of existence. But overall, the year was plagued by conversations about the use of AI, overworked writers and artists, and studio mandates drastically changing movies or delaying and eventually canceling projects. Picking my favorite movies of the year was easy, but therein lies the problem. Throughout the entire year, there were maybe only 3 or 4 movies that really stood out to me as movies I would want to revisit, and only 2 of those were for their good qualities. Even going into Oscar season, I struggled to really consider any frontrunners for any specific categories. Most movies ended up being a mixed bag, with certain aspects that I truly loved, while other aspects really dragged down what could have been great films. Despite this, I did still reach my goal and ended the year with a total of 64 movies under my belt. Desperate for a certain quality that seemed to be missing from movies, I ended up turning to shows and series more than I typically do. Early in the year, I watched many of the seasonal anime releases, and towards the middle of the year, I dove headfirst into reality and true crime docuseries, as well as catching bits and pieces of the Olympics. I also kept up on the big franchise series on the streaming services as well, which left me with 55 total shows of varying quality on my list for the year. We had truly groundbreaking shows that were compared to all-time great series, but we also had shows that caused full-blown meltdowns from supposed fans. Much like with movies, shows suffered from the same conversations about writing rooms and AI, along with heavy studio interference. We can only hope that in the coming year, we see a new golden age of television. Now, music for the past decade or so has really been limited to revisiting old albums that I used to listen to, or trying out recent albums released by artists I recognize from that same time frame. This year was something new though. After I went through all of the Eurovision entries, I began venturing out into other music that I never fully gave a chance, including many artists from other countries. I then began looking into music over here in the States that I saw trending but never actually listened to. And you know what? The pop girls are eating these days. I actually really enjoyed some of the artists that I never imagined I would, but I do have to admit that I guess I just don't fully understand the Sabrina Carpenter or Charlie XCX hype. Now, keep in mind, the year was not all good musically. Katy Perry and Justin Timberlake both came to mind as names I knew to look for, but neither of them delivered anything remotely worth taking in. By the end of the year, I decided that I wanted to create a playlist for my top 50 songs of the year, since the AI-created Spotify Wrapped playlist failed to fully capture my music tastes. And for those interested in judging my ears, the playlist will be linked in the description. Much like everything else we've discussed up to this point, video games were also very hit or miss this year. And unfortunately, because money is a factor, there were quite a few releases that I was unable to test out, seeing as how I needed to prioritize other games or more important expenses in life. Having said that, I truly do not believe that I missed any big games that would have impacted my picks for favorite games of the year, with the only potential exception being Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom. There were of course examples of cheap shovelware, some of which I even played on the channel early in the year. But even with missing some of the high-profile titles, I was easily able to fill my own personal top 10 favorite games list. Besides the new releases, there was also a major free update for my favorite game of all time, Stardew Valley. So it was a good year for me in terms of gaming, which is a big relief because the gaming industry was also plagued by massive layoffs, company closures, game delays, server shutdowns, and many other controversies. That seems to be a recurring theme for all of these different forms of media. Now, separating the year from media releases, it was a pretty busy year with a lot of big personal moments. I was relying on part-time income at the start of the new year after leaving a working situation in which I was being shorted in payment. But within a few months, I was given a full-time position in a retail environment with a consistent set of days off. Having the stability of full-time employment was a relief. And although the job itself was not necessarily something I wanted to return to, the people I was working with as well as the lower amount of responsibility compared to my prior experience helped to make the workday much less stressful. On the same subject, I was able to turn down a job offer which would have resulted in me taking home less pay after factoring in gas expenses, as well as having less time at home after factoring in travel time. And it would have also taken away the reliable days off, which allowed me to schedule important appointments and other events. While this may seem like a small thing, for me, it showed that I was finally in a mental space where I was willing to prioritize my own quality of life rather than simply taking something that was offered to me for simply the potential of upward mobility somewhere down the road. It has taken me years to reach that point, but I can finally look at a decision that I made and realize that I was choosing working in order to live rather than living in order to work. In May, my wife and I celebrated 1 year of marriage by retracing the steps taken on our wedding day. We went to the same diner for breakfast, we went to the same venue for dinner, we even ordered a smaller version of our wedding cake from the bakery that had prepared it for us. And then, over the summer, we took a family trip to France, during which we stayed at a chateau in a rural area north of Paris. Of course, we took a trip into the city where we saw the Eiffel Tower, took a boat trip to see the Notre Dame Cathedral, and visited a cafe to experience some of the atmosphere. We took a day to visit the smaller city of Amiens, where we picked up some of the best macarons we've ever tasted, and took a stroll through a quiet park. We also became closer with the family members who made the trip with us, as we would gather around the kitchen of the chateau to prepare group breakfasts and late-night snacks. Traveling to France and really just taking these personal moments with family and loved ones throughout the year really made for an experience that changed my outlook on many things, and also managed to help me work through some emotions that to this point in my life I had largely been ignoring. After returning to the States, we also gathered the family together so that the next generation could all be introduced to each other. Watching my niece start to walk and seeing all of the new additions to the family in the past year has done work to shift my priorities for the future as well. And as we headed into the fall, I finally accomplished something that I had been dreaming of since I was a child. I became a published author. I wrote a short story and put it into a book with other examples of word vomit that have some connection to the overall theme of the story. And once I had the copyright, I published it using the Lulu bookstore online. The link to the book is going to be in the description, but I want to be very clear. I do not expect or want people to spend money on this. This was a personal project for myself and my family, and I used it as a trial run so that for my next work I'll have an idea of what to expect when I go through the process. I would of course be more than happy to have others read it, and those who have read it have given me some much needed confidence in my future writing projects. But I do not expect any sales on this project, and I don't want this to come across as me promoting the sale of the book. As we entered the end of the year, the world around me became, shall we say, discouraging. My mental health was not in the best of places, and much of that had to do with the tone of the world. I had to stop talking to people about movies, books, shows, and games because much of the discourse surrounding those things only proved that people were generally uninterested in engaging with any type of media, preferring to simply use buzzwords to prove a point they came into the conversation with, despite the hypocrisy of their arguments. People I had once interacted with, I was now forced to see in a different light. And now, going into the new year, I am also forced to confront the concept that people I once thought I could trust to defend the ideas of freedom and tolerance do, in fact, have a price they are willing to sell their moral values for, and that price happens to be equal to the cost of a carton of eggs. I have to face the reality that while I prioritize the rights and safety of people around me, there are many out there who feel it is much more important that they be unbothered by any slight inconvenience. After so many years of dealing with it, I find that I have come to a place where it's difficult for me to maintain a positive mindset, yet we must keep going in the hope that things might change. So to end this off on a slightly lighter note, let's look at what I hope to accomplish in 2025. I am currently working on and want to finish my second book now that I have one under my belt. I also hope to upload more video projects over the year, starting with the videos in this upcoming week where I will be going through all of the books, movies, shows, and albums I took in over 2024. I want to revisit some of my favorite games and play through some games that have been sitting in the backlog for a long time. Then there's the question of reading. I hit 28 books this year, so for 2025 I would like to hit 30. But more importantly, I would like to reach a streak of reading at least one page every day for the full year. And finally, I would like to spend more time and make more memories with family and friends, because those are the things that will truly last. Now, what about you? Do you have any goals for 2025? Leave a comment and visit the Bidmock YouTube channel in the upcoming week to see how I feel about all of the media I consumed over the year. And then be sure to come back for the next video, probably in another, 6 months or so?